Before I start this review in earnest, I'd like to give a quick apology for what's about to happen. The only two actors in this particular film who I can feel relatively confident I'm saying their names correctly are George Lopez and Susan Sarandon. The others, if I mispronounce any of the names of these actors, I do apologise. I hope they don't take it too personally, and if I do offend anyone with my pronunciations, I do apologise. But anyway. Blue Beetle. This was the 14th film of the now defunct DC Extended Universe, released last year, and honestly, as a film, or an origin film for Blue Beetle, I honestly think it's decent. I mean, it's nothing groundbreaking per se, but I honestly thought this was a pretty good film. It does also highlight a character who, well, some people may not be as familiar with as compared to the rest of the DC lineup. I mean, I think even if you never picked up a comic book, you'd know the likes of Batman, Superman, or Wonder Woman. Blue Beetle, however, that's one maybe not that many people are familiar with. Now, apparently, there was actually plans to have kind of Blue Beetle introduced more to the public interest early on. I mean, back in around 2014, when Brandon Routh was joining the Arrowverse, apparently one idea they did have was to have his character called Ted Kord, that being one of the original Blue Beetles. However, when it came down to it, Warner Brothers said, no, hang on, you can't have Blue Beetle. We're not giving you permission to use Blue Beetle because we have other plans for Blue Beetle. So Brandon Routh's character was reworked into Ray Palmer, and he became the Atom. Now, the Blue Beetle we have here, it's a little more of a legacy film, more like Paul Rudd's Scott Lang in the Ant-Man movies, because the character that we're introduced to as Blue Beetle is actually more the second character to inhabit the role. That being Jaime Reyes, played by Zolo Maraduena. Now, as I said, if I mispronounce the name, I apologise. Now, Jaime Reyes, played by Zolo Maraduena, he's just returning home to his family in Palmera City after having graduated university. And he's greeted at the airport by his family, including his mother and father, played by Elpidia Carrillo and Damian Alcazar, his little sister Milagro, played by Belissa Escobedo, his grandmother, played by Adriana Barraza, and his uncle Rudy, played by George Lopez. To which, I love George Lopez as an actor. I mean, I'll admit the main reason I know who George Lopez is was because of The Spy Next Door, where he played one of the villains. But, yeah, well, George Lopez, he's a good actor, and it's always nice to see him. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, because although Jaime is returning home after getting his degree, and the family are all proud of him, they quickly reveal to him that they're in a little bit of a dire straits, because the landlords are going to put the rent up, they can no longer afford the house, the family garage is gone, so they have to kind of get jobs. And while Jaime feels confident now with his degree, can get a job, he and his sister eventually end up as cleaners for the Kord family. Now, the Kord family, they're a little eccentric, shall we say, and they're overseen by the aunt of the family, Victoria Kord, played by Susan Sarandon, who's rather bitter. I mean, especially since she had to wait until her brother seemingly disappeared before she got control of the company. And there's a little bit bitter at her late parents for not having trusted her enough to deal with a family business. Now, when Jaime ends up saving Victoria's niece, Jenny Kord, played by Bruna Marquezine, from an argument with her aunt, he's fired from his cleaning job, but Jenny promises to try and get him a job at Kord Industries, to which when he shows up to try and get the interview, she ends up in a bit of a hurry and hands him a box from Big Belly Burger, a fictional fast food chain in the DC universe, tells him not to open it, but to take it and protect it with his life and just hide her away somewhere. Because it turns out what Jenny had taken from Kord Industries was a mysterious item known as the Scarab, a kind of metal bug-like thing that Victoria had found in the Antarctic. To which Jaime takes it home, and after a little bit of peer pressure from his family members, he ends up opening the box to find the Scarab. And the Scarab, in a kind of cross between Iron Man, Spider-Man, and a little bit of Venom, it ends up bonding with him, becoming somewhat symbiotic. And when it bonds with him, it allows him, when he's kind of feeling threatened or when he's feeling under attack, like engages him in an armor, along with technology that allows him to fly, shoot energy blasts, and all the rest of it. To which, when Jenny discovers that it's bonded with him, they have to try and find a way of keeping it out of the hands of her aunt, who is very much in the style of, as I described it, imperialism in the name of democracy. Because what Victoria Cord wants to do is she wants to use the Scarab, which it turns out has a sentience and is named Kaji Da, played by Becky G, and she wants to kind of harness its technology and insert it into a group of technologically advanced super soldiers called OMAC, One Man Army Corps, to which she intends for the first member of the OMAC Guards to be her second-in-command, Ignacio Carapax, played by Raul Max Trujillo. So, overall, I think that this is a pretty good action movie. It's got some pretty good action scenes, it's got some good effects, it's got some likeable characters, especially with the Reyes family. I mean, as I said, George Lopez's Rudy Reyes is, I think, one of my favourites. But then I also grew to love the grandmother, played by Adriana Barraza, because while the grandmother at the start, she appears to just be like any other grandmother in movies, later on she becomes pretty badass. Like, when they eventually discover more, when Jaime ends up getting kidnapped by Victoria Cord in order to harness his technology, they discover more Blue Beetle technology as well as kind of special guns, and Grandmother goes badass with this. She ends up harnessing a Gatling gun and kind of telling everyone the plan and acting like a general, and everyone's just like, okay. To which she, as I said, she's pretty badass. I love it. And I will say this about Susan Sarandon as the villain Victoria Cord. There are very few villains in comic book movies that by the end of it I'm actually glad to see them die. To which I am going to have to go into a little bit of spoiler alert here, so if you don't want the movie spoiled, go off and watch it, because I am going to explore the end for you here. But Susan Sarandon throughout this movie, she acts the hell out of it, and you can really grow to hate this character, hate her character of Victoria Cord. I mean, she just is so mean, so bitter, and even when she kind of kidnaps her niece and is kind of talking to her, you just grow to see the hatred in her voice, so that when she eventually gets her comeuppance at the end of the film, you don't feel bad for this woman. You want to see her go to hell and die. Because ultimately, Jaime has to face off against Ignacio Carapax now as part of the OMAC project. He ends up deactivating the OMAC project, and Ignacio regains memories that he had lost from years ago that Victoria had wiped, and he remembers how Victoria had essentially set off a couple of missiles that had killed his mother when he was a child. And yes, she did kind of raise him under her guard for many years, but at the same time, he could see she was never nice, so he ends up overloading his suit and dragging Victoria back into the explosions, to which, when I saw that, I was just like, yeah, she deserved that. Ultimately, I think Blue Beetle is a very enjoyable film. The only slight problem, I guess, I really have with this film, and you may disagree with me here, I think ultimately it just came a little too late. Because, yeah, I feel like if this film had come out 10 years ago, like, very early, when we were still very early on in the stuff like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we just had the likes of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, and we're still early on with the new DC Extended Universe, this might have stood a better chance, and it might have actually been remembered better. However, now, in a world that's post-Avengers Endgame, Matt Reeves' The Batman, or the multiverse saga of the MCU, with our comic book movies now, we just need a little bit more. I mean, this is completely standard. This is still pretty good standard, but at the same time, it feels standard. Like, we expect a little bit more nowadays, and just it didn't quite live up to it. So yeah, the DCEU is now defunct, with James Gunn and the new directors going off in a different direction with a new DC universe set to begin with Superman Legacy. So ultimately, I think Blue Beetle is a sad casualty of that, but at the same time, it's an enjoyable film. It's an enjoyable family film, it's an enjoyable superhero film, and it's an enjoyable action film. Ultimately, it's nothing new, it's nothing that's going to take Hollywood by storm, but it's something that I'm glad I saw, and I might rewatch it again in a year's time. So there you go, that's my quick little review of the DC Extended Universe film Blue Beetle. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments. Until next time, see ya.